Good afternoon. Welcome aboard. This is the 4th day of January 2018. If you're in this area where I'm broadcasting from out in New Jersey, you are dealing with a good amount of snow. Hope you're safe out there. And for the most part, if you can, you're probably better off staying home. Lots of things we're going to get into. There's a couple points I brought up yesterday that I want to bring back up later on. But right now, I'm happy to be joined by a man who had a chance to pitch in the major leagues for a handful of seasons, and right now is a special assistant to the general manager of the Chicago White Sox, and that's Bill Scherrer. Bill, John Pielli over in New Jersey. Appreciate you having a couple minutes.
Nice talking to you, John.
Hey, Bill. First thing, I think of, what was it like, growing up as a kid, and what were your first interactions in regards to the world of sports?
Well, growing up in Buffalo, New York, I don't think we knew any better except like you're talking about snow. Buffalo was always the whipping city of the country. It was always, as articles used to come out, the armpit of the East. So I feel very blessed that I could be a part of the armpit of the East and representing Western New York. So for me, I was blessed to be able to watch my brother play at the University of Buffalo, to see Calvin Murphy and Bob Lanier and Randy Smith at Buff State. And then, I was lucky to see the Buffalo Braves and the Sabres and the Bills. And, they were our hometown team. And then really, to me, I played all sports, probably because of my older brother got me involved in it as well. And that's really, as a young kid growing up, maybe the kids are missing that a little bit. You were kicked out of the house, and until the streetlights came on, you heard your mother's voice, you ran back because it was time to eat, and you got back as quick as you could. But street football and kick the can and watching your favorite teams play and live and die with those, that was always fond memories of Western New York. And like I said, I was born and raised there, so to me, it was the best city in the country. So anytime I say that, and I'm traveling all over the country, most people think I'm drunk, which probably I am half the time, but when they say Buffalo, New York's the best city, and then I can tell them, well, listen, there's 4 seasons here, even though they're brief. We've got sports team, we got beautiful, if you like fishing and hunting, you can go over to Toronto. It was a great place to raise kids and to be raised there. And even then, I actually went back and raised my kids as well for 17 years. So their roots technically are back in Western New York as well, even though I'm here in Phoenix. But I did buy a place back in Clarence last few years ago. So, but fun, great memories. I said to somebody, maybe when I die, somebody might remember me if I go back and get my tombstone in Western New York. But it'll always be something I'll always treasure, is being born and raised. And people laugh about the people that had come out of Buffalo. They don't realize that Bob Lanier came from there, and Ron Jaworski, and the Magic Man, and Christian Leitner, and we can go on and on. Joe McCarthy, Sal Magley, Lawrence Spahn. It's funny, baseball's never notorious for especially that kind of climate over there, but we did have guys like Dave Hollins and Joe Hesketh and myself that come out of there. But I was always a baseball fanatic, and I was always a Yankee fan growing up. And as I used to laugh at people said, well, you're a front runner. I said, well, wait a minute, the early 70s Yankees were brutal until Brooks sold it to Steinbrenner. And then when the Yankees started buying players, it sounds funny, but I didn't like the Yankees then because I really didn't like Reggie Jackson. I was a Bobby Murcer fan, Mickey Mantle, but Bobby Murcer was my idol. So to see Murcer move from center field and Elliot Maddox going to center, I said, I'm done. I'm finished. And then when Murcer got traded for, I think it was for Bonds.
Yeah, Bobby Bonds.
It was a killer for me because being from the East Coast, we had morning paper, and all of a sudden now I can't envision myself rooting for Bobby Bonds. No knock on Bobby Bonds, but and then I obviously later on in life when I was playing for the Tigers and got player of the game, and I can talk to myself in my sleep and who interviews me with Bobby Murcer, and I was blessed to play with Bench and Rose and Concepcion and Trammell and Whitaker, which obviously just got inducted, and Schmidt. And I played at coaches, 12 Hall of Famers, so I was blessed. As crazy as my career was, I was more I was shocked and almost numbed by, there's Bobby Murcer asking me, how do I like the American League versus National League? And as Ryan Ferris once said, it's the first time I think I've seen Scherrer can't speak. So I don't get autographs signed because I'd rather know who you are, but I actually asked Bobby Murcer for an autograph, and he was a wonderful man, and unfortunately we've lost him, but it was great to even meet a guy that you idolized as a young kid. So.
Now, as you end up moving on and becoming a pitcher, obviously part of it is being blessed with a a powerful and strong left arm, which gives you an advantage in a game of baseball.
That was debatable. A lot of people thought that if I was right-handed, I couldn't have made my high school team. But that's thanks for that words of wisdom.
Now, in regards to pitching, is there somebody that you looked up to as a kid that you said, hey, this guy, I like the way he threw the ball, his mechanics, or was just straight up a fan of?
Well, you know what? When we were kids, we emulated things, and I used to emulate Murcer's batting stance. And it wasn't solely directed that I was a pitcher, yes, but did I emulate a pitcher? I guess at that time, I could say my favorite pitcher was, let's see, Mel Stottlemyre, because Stotts was still pitching for the Yankees. But I never, we did all of us did. We did batting stances, whether you love Carl Yastrzemski or whether it was my case, Murcer's approach. So I never really did that per se, like my pitcher emulating some pitcher. Some guys will do that. I mean, like I said, I played with Seaver briefly in Cincinnati, and the way I pitched was very unorthodox. I had that big leg kick, try to hide it. As Joe Grandiola would say, was all elbows and kneecaps, looked like a garden hose. But that's how I pitched, and that's a lot of us. That's how we did it, by just playing outside and doing our own mechanics and going through repetitions. And today, there's so many of these showcases, and the high-end guys are all picked from all over the country, and we played organized sports. We played team against team, and that made us all feel great about competition. And unfortunately, all over the country now, they can so travel in every sport that what's really hurt is the middle-class ball player, the kids who really were pretty good, but they weren't great enough to play on these travel leagues, but they were better than playing in wrapper room leagues.
Yeah.
So what they did is they just continued and they started playing other sports, maybe like lacrosse or soccer nowadays, or even hockey. I mean, it's become so travel and so dollars and cents that a middle-class person, I can't imagine that people can afford to send not just one kid, but tell all their kids that we have to pay thousands of dollars to put you into these so-called traveling leagues. I mean, they have to take out mortgages out, and that doesn't give them any promissory note that they're going to get a scholarship or go to professional level. I mean, I don't want to knock it, it's a racket. But in some ways, I've instructed in Pilates and baseball schools. I've run trial camps. I've done all that stuff. But we never promised the kids a rose garden. And I think what's happened to the parents is that if you don't spend your monies, or everybody thinks about notoriety, I got to be exposed. Well, I just gave you names that were exposed in Buffalo. I've been exposed in little small communities all over the country. If you're good enough, and I mean, you've got to be God blessed, and you've got to be lucky too without getting hurt. But we didn't have instructions. I mean, I think there's a lot of good things about today. They've got strength and conditioning. They're stronger. That doesn't mean they're better baseball players or better sports. Because sometimes I get aggravated, and sometimes you got to take a step backwards. And even basketball, they take 5 steps. Do you really see the real defense like I was seeing back when my brother was playing against those guys, or the Braves are playing in the 70s? We could argue that they're talented and they're better. Better in what way? Better because they can jump higher. But those other guys play real solid sports, basketball, fundamentals, and baseballs. We've missed some of that. And so I'm not going to player. I mean, I see every major league game for the last 16 years, behind home plate. And, that's why when people say, this is Derek Jeter, watch him as a young kid. Watch him how he runs through the bag. Watch him how he turns the bag and looks for his third base coach. Watch how he hits the cutoff. Watch how he gets his one-way lead. I mean, those are things when I would tell a young kid, that's how you want to play the game. No knock on the other guys, but they don't always run the ball out. They don't take infield anymore. I get it. It's a long season. Well, you know what? It was a long season when I was playing, too.
It was.
And I just told you that I played with 12 Hall of Famers. They can play in any era, no matter whether this era or any era. So, but I think kids need, it's unfortunate, but that's why guys like Mike Trout, he plays the game the right way. And, and from an ex-player, you really are happy to go to a ball game and watch the enthusiasm and how he plays and how his effort, because that rubs off with the teammates. And it also rubs off with the young kids who are not just emulating because he's a great player, but emulates it because that's how you play the game, regardless of whether you're a star or not a star.
So true. Once again, I'm joined by Bill Scherrer, assistant to the general manager of the Chicago White Sox. Obviously, I had a chance to pitch in the major leagues for the better part of the 1980s. Now, you go back and you spent quite a bit of time with the Reds in the latter part of the Big Red Machine, certainly as a young pitcher. I'm sure you were in spring training a couple years when you had a chance to see, all the best of the Big Red Machine. You have a chance, obviously, after you're traded with the Detroit Tigers, to play with another great team and a great organization that molded together a ton of very good players. Obviously, we see a couple getting honored into baseball's Hall of Fame in Jack Morris and Alan Trammell. I'm going to put you on the spot now. What team did you think was better?
Well, first of all, I signed in '77, so the Red Machine was pretty much, we were coming up, and we were really the Little Red Caboose.
Okay.
So the Red Machine was just basically almost dismantled. I mean, I played with Perez, and in Concepcion was still there in bench. I played with bench in '82, and I also, my first full year was '83. That was benches last year, and anybody remembers JB only caught half the season and then played third base. So it really is an unfair question. I mean, I could look at those players though, and it's hard to argue that when you have 4 or 5 Hall of Famers on the same lineup, it's pretty argued to say this the Alan Trammell team and Lou Whitaker and Jack and all that, but a great team. Listen, there's a great continuity of guys, and plus then when bringing in Darrell Evans and experienced players, Larry Herndons and Chet Lemon, and so it was a really, really, really good team. But to try to compare with Tony Perez and Dave Concepcion and Joe Morgan and Johnny Bench and Pete Rose, and even when George Foster was there, and I mean, it's really not fair. I mean, because when you start talking 4 or 5 Hall of Famers, I mean, that had to be a devastation for most teams to play against them. So, but to say that the Tigers weren't a really good team, I think what we had was great continuity. Anybody remembers 1984? There was 5 or 6 different winners in 5 different years.
Yeah.
So, whether it was the Red Sox or whether it was the Brewers, I mean, you can go on and on and on. It was very, very competitive, and you just because you had a really good team, as you remember, it hasn't won a World Series since. So.
No, I tell you, the best way that I look at it, Bill, is we really aren't comparing apples to apples. I mean, what made those Reds teams so great was a little bit different than what made those Tigers teams so great. But at the same time, there were a couple little similarities here and there. But listen, I mean, you're looking at 2 real, especially on a comparing that '84 team. You could compare that '84
right.
Tigers team to any team we've seen in baseball history as far as its dominance over the course of an entire league.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, remember, I was traded in the end of August when Davey Lopes got traded to the Cubs. I got traded to the Tigers, and they were 35-5. And I remember we had a little powwow with Jack, and I think Dan Petrie was there, and Doug Bear, myself, and we were in at the stadium, and Jack goes, "Well, you answered the question, 35-5." I looked at Jack. I said, "What, are you an idiot?" Because I was in Cincinnati. We were 5-35, and I don't think we were a bad team in Cincinnati either. But as I tell all my great fans of Detroit, name the 25-man rosters. Half those guys journeyed around for the most of their career, including myself. So when you're naming players, and even when I say Ken Griffey Sr. or George Foster or Cesar Geronimo, I mean, I think even Dennis Mickey was there. But, I mean, you go on and on with that team. Don't get me wrong, the core of the players, with the Trams and the Lou Whitakers and Gibby and Lance and Jack Morris and Dan Petrie, yeah. But Willie Hernandez was just acquired.
Yeah, he was.
Gary Herndon was on a journey experienced veteran guy, as well as Darrell Evans. Dave Bergman was there. Marty Castillo had a big-time home run. Marty never got back to the big leagues after '84. So, and you had Doug Bear, who bounced around. Really, Lopez had a great year. But if you start looking at Rusty Kuntz, Johnny Grubb, it's not Tommy Brookins, lunch pail Tommy. I mean, it was a good, but that's where teams win. And I think what they had is a great chemistry of team. What I think, to try to compare the Reds, they were studs. When you start seeing 5 Hall of Famers on the same field, we're not even talking pitching right now.
Yeah.
Which I used to yell at Johnny Bench. I said, they brought in the Red Machine guys, and they had 8 guys. I looked at Bench. I said, what, his pitcher doesn't count? I mean, you could have brought in Gullett. I mean, you guys didn't bring a pitcher. So, but I think it's really tough to compare because, even though Tram and Jack are in the Hall of Fame, you're still talking about Pete Rose. You're still talking about Joe Morgan. You're still talking Davey Concepcion could argue whether he's a Hall of Famer or not. We could discuss this. But Joe Morgan and George Foster was just coming in. I mean, those were pretty dynamic. Listen, this is no cut down on the Gunning Tigers. I mean, I think the Tiger team was a great team and had great nucleus of players. It's just, to me, it'd be really unfair to put in the prime of their careers with the Red Machine to try to compare it with the Tigers. Because I think, the Tigers won one World Series. The Red Legs won at least two. Was it three? Or they won two?
Yeah, they won two in, was it 75 and 76?
Right. So they won two back-to-back. And again, that was back when there was a lot of good competitive teams as well. So this is no knock on the Pirates, and there was really good teams. But you're right. I mean, that's why people don't ever want to go comparisons. I mean, I remember Bertie Tibbetts once said, when people said to you, who do you think is the best player? And he said the best thing to do is that player or that team was the best in that era.
Yeah.
Because the hardest thing is to try to compare one era to the next. So I think that's a tough thing.
No, it's so true.
I'm blessed to play with that team. So listen, I think they were all great. I just was glad I didn't screw that thing up. Something like what, unfortunately, Donnie Moore had unfortunate problems in California with that home run that Henderson hit. I always grudge about people. I said, you know what, get them out. I hope you're successful, but I hope I'm not the one that, like with Billy Buckner, what a horrible feeling that must be. What a great career he had, and to be remembered for that. I mean, that is just, that's devastation. It's the most cruelty. But that's part of sports.
Now, I tell you, going back further, I mean, these are just, legends and obviously of things that happened. But the Merkle boner in 1908, Fred Snodgrass dropping that fly ball in the 1912 World Series. I mean, he ended up, Fred Snodgrass died somewhat about 60 years later after that, the blunder in the World Series. And it said on the newspaper headline, Fred Snodgrass dropped fly ball in World Series, dies. And that's how his obituary read.
It's a shame. Really, it's a shame. I mean, think about one of my favorite moments. It's more of a laughing moment. What was the picture that Bobby Thompson hit the homer? It was
Ralph Branca.
Branca. And I always laugh about it. He goes, why do you laugh? I said, well, watch the whole play. Remember, I worked with Whitey Lockman. I was with the original Marlins when we all came in 1991 and 92. 93 was the original year with the team, but we were all put together in 92. And Whitey Lockman was there, and a gentleman and a scholar, believe me, what a wonderful man. But I always laughed at him. He goes, you think that was why do you laugh? I said, well, there was a guy that ran out of the dugout and wouldn't let, was it Stanky or something? It was, I don't know, it was Jerosher. The third base coach couldn't get to Bobby Thompson because the other guy was mauling him, and he never could get to home plate. Not Birdie, Eddie Bachman, not Eddie Bachman, what did I just say? Thompson would say, well, there's more to this story. And I mean, it was probably he knew the guy and all that, whether it was this. But I always thought that was the most thrilled thing. But Ralph Branca, remember giving up that home run. But, it is cruel. And it is something that people, and I'm thankfully that in the Buckner thing, they brought him back, and I did some of that stuff. But, it just puts such a bad taste in your mouth about what a guy did and how he even tried to get himself ready and prepared to play the game. It wasn't his fault that he was playing. Who was managing that year? I think it was McNamara?
Yeah, McNamara was managing.
Yeah, John, because John was there. And he played him. And, this guy was taping up his knees just to play as gritty as he has always played. There's a guy that probably shouldn't have been playing, but he was. And then we remember that as well. So, I mean, there's, like I said, I always think of Donnie Moore because Donnie Moore was coming up with the Braves in 1977 in Greenwood while I was in Shelby, my first year with the Reds. And I'm sure there's more stories to it of what happened in Donnie Moore's personal life. But that home run, if you just imagine if that was in New York or that was Boston if he was playing more.
No, absolutely. And you think about what, we mentioned about Buckner, as very good of a player as Buckner was. And, I mean, he was pursuing 3,000 hits. So that play ended up, kind of putting a damper in his career. And it just, for whatever reason, his career kind of ended within the next couple of years after that. But Donnie Moore was a very good pitcher for a couple of years. 84 with the 84, 85 with the Angels, even threw the ball pretty well with the Braves before that. So this was a guy who's one of the premier relievers in a game, in a big spot, gives up a home run, which, by the way, a lot of people forget that the Angels tied the game in the next half inning. And they end up losing that game in extra innings. So the home run that he gave up to Henderson did not cost them the game, but they ended up losing the game a couple innings later.
And if you remember, they had the canines outside around the warning track, so they were ready and prepared to win it.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I really, I was blessed because that guys like Jack and people don't realize how good Dan Petrie, people don't realize what a great year Bill Wilcox had for us in '84 too.
Yeah.
And Willie, obviously, we know from all the journey that he played was the Cy Young and the MVP. But, guys that were, special guys that had really good years. I mean, that's where when you win, you start talking about people like Rupert Jones or like Larry Herndon or Johnny Grubb or Tommy Brookins or Marty Castillo. People that people might not even remember. We all know the core players, and you have to have core players to win. And Jack deserves it recognized for at least in the Hall of Fame. But people don't realize how good a staff that was, too, as well as a veteran bullpen. Aurelio Lopez pitched phenomenal in that World Series. I mean, he pitched solid the whole time. And, so it's a team concept to win. And like I said before, I mean, we always remember, like Eckersley, giving up the homer to Gibby, with the Dodgers. I mean, but it didn't affect Eckersley as much as when we think of people like Donnie Moore. And like I said before, they have really good careers, but sometimes they're never forgotten, like you just mentioned about the obituary, about something instead of what this guy was and what kind of person he did or where are they now stuff. Well, they don't care. It's like the Barkman guy from Chicago. I mean, he gave a World Series ring.
And you know what? There probably wasn't a person in the city of Chicago that rooted for the Cubs any more passionately than that fan did either.
Can you imagine that? I mean, just think about that guy. This guy's a normal fan like any other fan would react. And, Moises Allou's trying to go get the ball. Well, there's 9 innings. There's a whole process of this game, why you win and why you lose. And they point the finger at some kind of pedestrian who's sitting up in the stands. And he's remembered for the rest of his life. Even after they win a World Series, it doesn't matter. He's still going to be remembered his whole life for that episode.
Nah, it's amazing. And once again, John Pielli, I'm happy to be joined by Bill Scherrer, who works for the Chicago White Sox, former pitcher in the major leagues in the 1980s. Back to when you were talking about the Tigers. This will be my last question. I really appreciate you having a couple minutes. What do you think it was? And my answer, I think, is a combination of both. But was it the leadership in the Tigers clubhouse, or was it the leadership from management with, let's say, a Sparky Anderson that was able to hold everybody together? Because that 84 Tigers team to me seems, like you just said, a very balanced team, a team that everybody was on the same side. It was a very good team in a team sport.
Well, and we're still doing it somewhat now. It's just very more difficult now to keep guys at bay and making sure. Remember, it all started when Bill LaJoie probably was scouting director and be drafting people like Morris and Petrie and Brookins and Trammell and Whitaker and Parrish and Gibson. So the core of the play, Rosemo was drafted by them. So their core was drafted. They went through the system and taught by those coaches and the scouts that signed them. So that was the uniform they wore. And then Sparky obviously came over from the Red Machine and was really good with chemistry and makeup guys. So who did he bring over? He brings over great guys and great makeup and still had something left in the tank with Darrell Evans. He brought in Dave Bergman to do his thing, Larry Herndon, Chet Lemon, Johnny Grubb. He had bits and pieces of guys that knew what they had to do. Willie Hernandez obviously came over and was a whirlwind. He had Lopey. Doug Bear was a veteran guy. So he meshed together a drafted bunch of players with LaJoie. Sparky and I'm sure LaJoie together brought in chemistry makeup guys to patch up the work to make this team go for 25 guys. And everybody knew their role. And so when you think of the core, it was really born and bred Tigers. And all those other guys were added ingredients to make this team a successful club. And really, it was, I'm sure, Sparky deserves the credit. But so does Bill LaJoie, and so does all the farm directors and the coaches in the minor leagues, as well as the scouts that drafted them, because that was the team. And, you can't take anything away from Lou Whitaker. And when's the last time you're ever going to see Lou Whitaker and Alan Trammell play 21 and 19 years on the same team? That's not going to happen anymore.
Yeah, you will never see that again.
Well, you're not going to happen because of money and everything else. So you had that, up the middle combination for that many years. Even though Jack bounced around and won World Series with other clubs, and Petrie pretty much was, a Tiger for most of his career as well. I mean, but Lance, and then collusion came in, and all the arbitrational dollars, and people couldn't afford it, and ownership wasn't going to pay it. So as what we look at today versus the way we look back then, it's going to be, it seems it's very hard or more difficult now to do that because of the economy and what we have in baseball. But I think it was a mixture of both. I think it was great drafts and great players and great system, and also patching with veteran guys, knew their roles, and it all blended. You got to be lucky too. I mean, that team was really, really good, but you also got to have a few breaks. People don't remember we were 7 games in first place, playing a 4-game series in Toronto, and I pitched 3 of those. I pitched 4 of them, but Toronto could have swept us, and we would have only been 3 games in.
Yeah.
Going into most of September. But we swept them, so instead of being 7 games up, we were 11. So it was pretty much a close deal. So people don't remember how good that Toronto team was in 1984 with Mosby and Barfield and who was there? Davison Garcia there, and a bunch of those guys. They were really good. And Steve was there, King Clancy. I mean, they had Mosby.
Pat Gillick was the GM.
Team as well. So.
Yeah, and I tell you, they end up having their moment in the sun in 1985. They won the division that next year. So, I mean, it goes back to what you said earlier about the balance, in the American League, particularly in the American League East around that time. There were so many good teams competing year in and year out against each other.
So there really was. I mean, like I said, but we always seem to forget, the Carter homer and everything else. Obviously, the Blue Jays were really, really good then. But people don't realize back then that we were playing at the exhibition center versus, the Sky Dome. So it was a little different kind of atmosphere too, how cold it was off that water. But they had a really, really good team, as you just said, in '85, and they were a very competitive team, and then they got better and better as well.
So true. Listen, Bill, I really appreciate you having the time. Would love to have you on the show sometime again in the future. Great talking with you, and best of luck to the upcoming season with the White Sox.
Thank you, and take care.
All right, that was Bill Scherrer, former Major League pitcher, works for the Chicago White Sox as an assistant to general manager Rick Hahn, and a lot of stuff to kind of get into off of there. And I tell you what stands out in regards to Bill Scherrer kind of leading me into what I want to talk about today is I found out that he was a very big Buffalo fan. He grew up in Buffalo. It's where he was born and raised. And guess what? 2 major points I got to make about the Buffalo Bills as we move forward in the program today. The first thing I think is not getting enough attention in regards to what it should. And it's showing the goodness of humanity in regards to how we, as people, may be interested more in the mocking aspect of it. But the bottom line is people are doing the right thing. And, of course, the Buffalo Bills getting into the playoffs and have a chance to play a playoff game in Jacksonville this coming Sunday for the first time since 1999, the longest playoff drought in all of professional sports, and obviously the longest in professional football. So their game was done when they beat the Miami Dolphins as we hit the halfway point here on the Pass Ball Show. John Pielli with you. Today is the 4th day of January, and I over the last couple of days, I haven't been able to get the day right to save my life. A couple of days I haven't posted the right year. I think when I posted on Facebook Live today, I put the 3rd instead of the 4th. So one of these days I'll figure out actually what day it is. But if you look outside in this area, very cold out, a lot of snow coming, still snowing over by me, and there's literally been snow since the beginning of last night and up until early this morning. But going back to what I was talking about with the Bills, the Bills win against the Miami Dolphins. They needed to win that game. If they didn't win, there would be no chance they could get in the playoffs. They finished 8-8. Their season is over. Their playoff drought continues. But they win the game. But they're still not guaranteed a playoff spot. The Baltimore Ravens have control of their own destiny playing the Cincinnati Bengals. The Ravens get a late score. They're up ahead. And the Bengals, who move the ball downfield. The big touchdown pass was like 30-something yards from Andy Dalton. Ends up putting the Bengals up, and the Bengals win the game. Because of that, the Buffalo Bills are in the postseason. And going back to making a long-winded point to what I originally wanted to say, Buffalo Bill fans start donating money to the Andy Dalton Foundation. And I will tell you this, Marvin Lewis, who I spoke about a couple days ago or yesterday, he gets his job back. He seemed like he was out, seemed like he was going to take a different position in an organization, ends up getting a 2-year extension. I believe, from ownership to the general management in that organization, came down to the fight of the Bengals in that last game. You know, you're sitting there 6-9, nowhere to go, no chance of making the playoffs. It's a big disappointment. Second straight year you didn't make the playoffs after making the playoffs 5 straight years when, by the way, people think you got enough talent to be a playoff team. So what happens? The Bengals, on the last game of the season, a chance to play, of course, a division rival, the Baltimore Ravens, but a chance to knock them out of the playoffs or a chance to make their opportunity to get in the playoffs a little bit tougher. And they fought. They played that game hard. They had the lead considerably throughout, but it was very easy for the Cincinnati Bengals to just lay down. Now when the game starts, but when the Ravens come back in that game and take the lead in the fourth quarter, what is it for the Bengals if they come back and win that game? Their season is over. So, from a coaching standpoint, Marvin Lewis still has the pulse of his players, even on a team that's 6-9, with a loss would have been 6-10. And the quarterback, Andy Dalton, leads them down the field, and they end up winning the game. And a great job by the Buffalo Bills fans that start donating money to the Andy Dalton Foundation. And I'm sure that probably blew Andy Dalton's mind. You know, you're looking at a guy that obviously has no interest in the Buffalo Bills. And all of a sudden he wins a game that gets the Buffalo Bills into the playoffs by beating the Baltimore Ravens. And he's getting all this money donated to his foundation. Thousands and thousands of people, thousands and thousands of Buffalo Bill fans are out there contributing money to Andy Dalton's foundation. And I'll tell you, we talk about bad things that go on in sports, bad things that fan bases do, and fans of certain teams and the way they act. I'll tell you this, outstanding job by the Buffalo Bills fans. Because you know what? Some of them may have been doing it as a way of kind of, hey, thanks, Andy Dalton. But you know what? Remember, Andy Dalton didn't lose. He won. So Andy Dalton is going to be able to hold his head up high no matter what. It wasn't like they're donating money to a guy on the Baltimore Ravens, and I don't have the replay in front of me, but the defensive back that gave up the touchdown, it wasn't like they were mocking anybody out. You know what? Andy Dalton led that team down the field when he probably didn't have to. It would have been just as easy for him to lay down. The team wasn't going to go anywhere. So, number one, great job by the Bengals fighting until the last play. And I know that's why their coach is extended for another couple of years. People can rant and rave all they want about Marvin Lewis being there too long. You know what? Once again, I'm rooting for Marvin Lewis. I want to see Marvin Lewis not only lead the Bengals into the playoffs, but have enough of a nucleus around that team where they can go out there and compete for an AFC championship. And I know in the generation or the times of the New England Patriots, it's hard to see another team coming out of that American Football Conference. But, I'm rooting for the Bengals. You know what? Very quietly, I want to see them succeed. And certainly the Buffalo Bills fans that are donating to Andy Dalton's foundation did an absolutely great job. Another story I'm going to talk about, and I will give the Bills fans credit, but the other thing that I want to get into is something that kind of bothered me the other day. And, I don't have the story here, so I'm going to have to paraphrase it. But the bottom line is there is a writer that decides, and I guess he's not a sports fan, and he decides that he wants to take a shot at the fans of the Buffalo Bills. Which, by the way, anytime you decide that it's time to take shots at fans, you really don't get anywhere. And I'll tell you, I'm not the biggest fan of all fans per se. I think fans, stand on a soapbox and they have this little entitlement in some cases that they feel like they could say and do whatever they want. So I'm not going to necessarily say that fans are right all the time. But whether you're a player, whether you are a member of an organization, or in this case, if you're a writer, when you go out there and decide that there's nothing better to do than to take a shot at the fans, you never seem to get anywhere. And it's something that never turns out good for you. And this writer deciding, and listen, he's got issues going on. Or his major point is to bring up the issues that are going on in this country, and there's people that unfortunately are poor, and the direction of the country may not be great. Morale may be a little bit down, and this is all stuff that we've addressed on this show at some point. But here's the issue that I have, and this is what bothers me all along. We look at sports as a way to take away mentally from all the reality in this world. We think of things, and you turn on the news, and like I said, I'm going to keep bashing the news because I'm not a fan of the news. I never will be. I think the integrity of news reporting has become so disgusting and so slanted and so biased, no matter who's reporting it, by the way. And I'm not taking a side because I don't have a side in regards to politics. I don't have a side in regards to what news I prefer to hear. You know what news I'd rather hear? I'd rather hear news that's based off of facts, not based off of opinions. And you're looking at the modern generation of the new writer and the new journalist that are so slanted and biased in regards to their own opinions. And they're reporting opinions over facts. And it's something that bothers me. It really does. Now, going back to my original point, we're talking about sports. Just being able to take somebody away temporarily from things going on in the news. Everybody's down, or people are down on things going on in the country. Are we worried about nuclear war? Are we worried about this? Are we worried about that? What did this person say? Am I offended here? Am I offended there? People out in the Buffalo Bills fandom in the Buffalo area are rooting for the Bills. And you know what? There's other things going on in the backdrop. And they're able to, for good reasons, to be able to not think about it when their favorite team is playing. And their favorite team is playing. They're able to just root for the team. And you know what? Maybe afterwards, or maybe later that night, maybe the next day, they go back and start thinking about things that are bringing them down, or other issues, or tackling the things that they have to deal with over the course of an everyday life. But sports give us that, that awesome ability to just forget about everything else for a little bit. And this Buffalo Bills writer, or this Buffalo writer, I'm sure he's not a sports fan, decides to bring up all these serious issues that are going on in Buffalo or in the nation, and it's like people are being forced to address it. It's like you put on the television and you have options in regards to programming that you watch, and in this writer's mind, right, he wants the same thing to be on every channel, and he doesn't want you to have options. He wants the information, whether it's bad, it's terrible, or it's just straight up ugly. He wants that thrown in your face. He wants every single person, whatever your interest is, to be focused on these serious issues. And in some cases, some of these issues can't even be addressed by any individual person. So somebody worrying about the threat of nuclear war. Sure, it's something that'll be on all of our minds. But you know what? If every single person, if 200 million people in the country are all worried about nuclear war, is that going to decrease the chance of us actually having a nuclear war? The answer is no. So let's stick to other mediums of entertainment. You know, there's sports, but if you don't like sports, there's music, there's movies, there's television shows, sitcoms. You got all these different things, and I'm not a big fan of, you know, whatever, the dramas or the stuff that you see every week. You know, the things that people watch and talk about. Oh, I can't believe this happened on this or that happened on this. I'm not a big fan of that, but it's there for you. It's there as a form of entertainment. And you know what? The one thing that all these forms of entertainment have in common is they take the person that may have a bad day or may have to deal with some serious issues. Nobody's perfect. Even for the person that has the great life. You know, the person that has that, everything that they could ever imagine. And I'm fortunate to have, as you know, for everything that I have, and I'm thankful for everything that I have. But if you're having a bad day and you could turn to some form of entertainment, what's wrong with that? Why is there an issue to that? And I'm sorry, because that bothers me. And this writer that decides that he wants to make such a big deal about the fact that the Buffalo Bills fans are happy that the Buffalo Bills made the playoffs. And they haven't been there in almost 20 years. I think it's just terrible reporting. And this guy is really gonna make that, you know, every fan feel like they're so ignorant and they don't know what's going on in the world that we live in. But this guy is completely ignorant over the fact that, and I'm not finding a story to save my life, which is frustrating me because I want to call the guy's name out there. And what I'll do is, I promise, on my Pass Ball Show page and Twitter handle, I'm going to call this guy out for what he is. I mean, there is no reason for anybody. There is no reason for this guy to have to, maybe, you know, I don't know what it is. I mean, is he lecturing us? He decides that he's the person, he's the voice of reason that's going to tell everybody that's a sports fan, everybody that's a Buffalo Bills fan, that they don't have any interest or any need in having to worry about anything else, or they can't be happy that the Buffalo Bills are back in the playoffs for the first time in 18, 19 years. Screw you. Yeah, and this is the problem with reporting as we see it now. We look at people that have the power to pen, or now we talk about the power of the keyboard, and they're able to put stuff in his stories that are so slanted. And this guy obviously is not a sports fan. And you know what? If he doesn't like sports, like I said, there's so many different things that we can look for in entertainment. And you know what? If you don't like anything digitally or out there in front of you that you see with your own eyes, how about reading a book? How about listening to some music? You know, if everybody was as uptight as this writer for the Buffalo, in Buffalo is, you know, we would have paranoia to a point where there would be unrest that's even worse than it is in the worst regions of this country. So this guy is actually, in his own way, he's inciting violence, because nobody is able to sit there and think about negativity upon negativity upon negativity and have no outlet to address it in any way, shape, or form. And is going to end up not losing it at some point, or not freaking out, or not being depressed or angry, or just straight up pissed off. So this guy is actually, in a weird way, inciting, you know, with his negativity, he is inciting a potential for violence. And I said all along, we rely on entertainment for one reason, and it's to keep us away from all the negativity that's thrown in our face in regards to life. That's all the news produces at us. Remember, years ago, we used to focus on that feel-good story that would be at the bottom of the newscast, after the weather, after the sports, after traffic. We knew that we'd hear something that's nice to make up for all the BS and the crap that we had to hear in the first 20 minutes or the 40 minutes of the news program that we're watching to. Now, if it's a half-hour show, it's a half hour of negativity. If it's an hour show, it's an hour's worth of newscast of negativity. You know, and somebody that's out there that wants to find an alternative or just wants to have some more positive vibes going on in their head. Because how can you watch a half-hour newscast now or one of these 24-hour news stations that's just throwing negativity upon negativity upon negativity, and their reporting is even up for questioning as far as the integrity of it and its honesty? Because, you know, everybody that's reporting on a story has an opinion about the story before they write the story.